Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Paranormal Paradigm podcast. Unfortunately today Ben can't be with us as he's busy elsewhere, and for a brief moment I thought I was going to be flying solo, but luckily I have a friend Ryan who came round just to drop off some equipment, as luck would have it, a night vision camera that we've recently purchased, and I've asked him if he would like to step in and give us a few of his thoughts on paranormal investigating. So today you're kind of getting a 2-for-1. You're getting two guests rolled into one episode, so lucky you. Ryan, hello.
Hello.
So thanks for joining us. Bit lucky that you came round.
Indeed, yeah.
And you don't have any other plans.
It's a bit late if I do, isn't it, really?
Yeah, so he's sticking around. You can't see the gun I've got to his head to make him stick around. But so Ryan comes out on investigations with us over the past year or so. He's been coming on more and more. He's helped us out greatly, places like the pub where sometimes we don't have other crew members turn up for whatever reason, and he steps in and really helps us. So he's almost an honorary member of the crew. Maybe we should appoint you as a.
I'm usually the one crawling in the corner.
Yeah, he's normally the first one to run out the door when something happens. So for our listeners, what got you interested in paranormal investigating?
I don't know. Going back to when I was a child, I had a few experiences and stuff going on in my house. Well, flat originally when I was a younger child, then house. So I've always had kind of an interest in the paranormal. It's kind of one of those things you put to the back of your mind, you just get on with, and you don't really pay much attention to. And then it was
as a child, you don't really understand it though. So
well, no, not so much so. But you do understand the concept of there being sort of possibly ghosts and afterlife, all that sort of stuff. But that was it. I'm into all conspiracies, all that sort of stuff. And then when you started getting into all this, the investigations and all that, you were doing one at the pub, and you asked me if I'd like to come along to one, and that was that.
That was that, yeah. And now you've been on, a handful or more investigations. Ryan was with me when I caught that photo that you guys may have seen that I uploaded to Facebook in the graveyard. There was only me and Ryan there actually that night. We're going to go back. This will go out after, but when we've recorded this, we're going to go back in a few days' time.
So this might be the last you hear from us?
It definitely had that daunting feeling when we were there last time. I know I spoke to you guys about it, what happened with the light that came on, and Ryan's headphones were moving on their own around his neck.
Mm-hmm.
However, it was cold.
It was very cold,
about -1.
Started snowing, didn't it?
Snow. It's the only snow I've actually seen
was it
this winter. Well, yeah, like Silent Hill, some kind of ash. But yeah, it got quite creepy towards the end, and although we were thinking of winding it up, I do feel like we felt like we had to leave, and kind of head out. And
it was almost as if we were being pushed towards, especially when we got towards the entrance at the end. It was as if we was being pushed out of the actual.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, yeah, it was. We kind of felt ourselves drifting more and more towards the exit or the entrance of the graveyard, like a gate. And when we got there, we basically just couldn't wait to get over the threshold.
No.
And back into the car, mainly to get warm, but also because there did feel like a presence that was pushing us. So when you're investigating and having been quite a newbie to the field, what are your thoughts on how it's done? I mean, obviously you've watched TV programs throughout the years. You've been with other groups who've done this kind of thing, and what. Everybody picks up their own way of doing it. Everybody picks up what they like about it, what they dislike about it. What are your overall opinions on investigating?
I think a lot of the methods are very outdated.
Okay.
So I think there's a lot of room for new ideas, new ways. Now, what those things are, I'm not quite sure yet. I do try to tinker with things, as you probably
right.
as you see.
Actually, Ryan, he's quite I guess I don't know what the word is.
Definitely not clever.
Being hard on yourself. He tries to push the boundaries with what we do. So ideas such as using magnets around the outside of a spirit board to see if there's any kind of interference with the magnetic field, and to see if that is what's moving the glass, and I applaud that kind of thinking. And it's that we are trying it. We will be trying it, and I know you've got several more ideas as well.
Yeah.
So he's almost like the Tesla of the Tesla of our group, kind of pushing the boundaries with what we're doing. Okay, so you think there's outdated. You're obviously, as I've just mentioned, you're constantly trying to think of new ways to contact the spirit world, shall we say?
Yeah.
What is your opinion on? I guess so. When you've been with other groups, was there anything that you disliked with what they did? Was there anything that you liked and you've taken forward with your personal investigations?
Some groups, I'm not going to obviously name drop.
Yeah.
Some groups, things are quite forced upon you, so you're told how to feel. Okay. So sometimes you go around with a group and there'll be somebody with you who will be, are you feeling this? This is what happened here.
Subconsciously planting it into your mind, yeah.
And so you do kind of subconsciously feel that way, even though you tell yourself, right, I'm not going to feel that way. You do start to feel that way, and you do kind of thing. And it's when you get told information about a place before you go in it, as much as you try to not
have it in your mind,
it does come up, and it will. And I find it interesting if you know about somewhere before you go in there, say like a spirit board, that name will come up on the board, or something will come up on the board based on that place. Whereas if you don't know nothing about the area, I mean, we did an investigation before, we didn't know anything about the actual building at all. We did an investigation, and we came up with what happened in the building, and it was afterwards, speaking to the owner of the building, we found out there was actually a fire, but we came up with that on the board before we'd spoken to the owner. Yeah,
I mean, just for your listeners, to go into a bit more detail there, what Ryan's talking about is we were on a spirit board, and it came across that we were talking to a young... Was it a young girl?
Young girl, yeah.
A young girl, and she claimed that she died in this building with her family, and she died in a fire. She named the year 16.
No, she said it was 454 years ago, which was very weird.
Yeah, instead of actually telling us the year. But maybe being her age back then, they might not have known the year. I don't know. But yeah, then when we later went and spoke to the lady who, I guess the manager of the place who was opening and closing for us, she told us that, there had been a fire there and there were deaths. And this was going, she said it was 1600 and something, and it give or take a decade, it was around the same time that we got from this girl on the spirit board. So when stuff like that happens, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It validates what you found and stuff like that. So yeah, that's good actually. When stuff like that happens, it makes you want to
trying to find more. But yeah, going back to what I was saying about groups, when I personally do investigations, I don't like to tell people how to feel. Ask me, did you feel that? Did you see that? I didn't see any. I let them tell me how they feel, and I do reiterate, it's nothing silly. No matter how
to admit what you feel.
Yeah, no matter what they feel, what they think. We had one. I don't know if you've mentioned before too. But we had one with a lady in the pub when she said a name in the cellar, the basement. She said a name.
Oh, yeah.
And
Jez.
Jez, yeah, she said Jez. We was like, she kept saying the name Jez, and we was all stumped. Nobody called Jez had ever worked there. We'd asked the landlord. It was only later on the evening, a different group had done a spirit board in the toilets, hadn't they? Girls' toilets.
The ladies' toilet.
The ladies' toilets, yeah. We had no interaction with this group who'd been downstairs, and they've got the name Jez on the board, which was quite...
So again, it's that validation of what you're picking up. Yeah. I think what Ryan's saying is it echoes what I say, and listeners will know, I've said it many, many times, that some of these groups do push you to feel or see certain things. And what's interesting is, obviously, Ryan and I know each other, and we share we share similar opinions, and we also disagree on some things. But the more and more people I talk to who are striking out on their own, who are independent researchers and whatever, they all have the same opinion about these groups and about the wrongs and right way of investigating. That's not to say that everything they do is wrong.
No.
There are some tips that you can pick up from them, which are really, really good. But you've always got to have it in your mind that they're, potentially just leading you on for monetary purposes, I guess, as we've discussed before. Right, so I did ask Ryan before we started recording if he wanted to stick around to interview our guest, and he has agreed. So he might be quiet. He doesn't really know much about the guest. He's literally just turned up. So he might be a bit quiet. He might pop up with the odd question. So if you hear a much broader Black Country accent than my own, that's Ryan. So I hope you guys enjoy Ryan's involvement tonight.
Or non-involvement.
Or non-involvement if he sits quiet. And tonight's guest is actually Melissa Martell. So she's the host of the Secret Door podcast, and listeners that have been with us from the near the start, this was episode 4, the famous elusive episode 4. So if you look for episode 4 in the Paranormal podcast, you won't find it. And that's because we had to delete it, unfortunately, because I think 30 minutes or so of the audio uploaded, and we don't know what happened, but the rest of it all got erased, it got deleted, or it never recorded. We don't know. And we thought better to just get rid of it than to have you guys get half hour into an episode and not really have any outcome. So we got rid of it, and tonight we're finally getting round to getting Melissa back on, and we're going to be talking about green ladies and other spirits that haunt stately homes, particularly in the UK. Now, Melissa's based in Canada, but she does have a huge interest in the UK and the ghostly goings on over here in England, particularly. And we're going to be getting into the green ladies. We'll be talking about colours of spirits. We have grey ladies, we have green ladies. Does that mean anything in particular? Does the colour that we see on a spirit mean anything? Is it something they're trying to tell us? Who knows? We'll discuss that with Melissa. And yeah, we hope you enjoy it. And we're joined by Melissa. Melissa, how are you?
I'm really well. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
That's okay. And Melissa, meet Ryan, my co-host today.
Hello, Melissa.
Hi, Brian. How are you doing?
I'm too bad, thank you. How are you?
You know what? It's 10 a.m. here and I'm still waking up, but I'm good. I'm good to go.
Wow, we're going to be ready for bed in a couple of hours.
Ready for bed now.
Yeah. So for our listeners, we, as mentioned in the intro, we had Melissa on previously. Unfortunately, the recording didn't quite work out how we wanted to, so we had to delete. And luckily, Melissa has agreed to come back on. So Melissa, you're going to be talking about green ladies and spirits that tend to haunt stately manors within the UK.
Yeah, I host a podcast myself called Secret Door Podcast, and it was an episode I did earlier on, before I actually have a co-host now, and you had asked me to talk about it. Of course, recording went bad, so it happens. Maybe the green ladies had something to do with it, but I figured, yeah, we can recover it because it's interesting folklore. It's an interesting topic, and it's highly specific to your neck of the woods.
It is. I mean, there's. I think we mentioned it when we previously recorded, but there's not a stately home in England, particularly, where there isn't some kind of spirit or lady or headless man that is associated with the house. And quite often people claim to have seen these spirits. So, do you want to kick us off with a particular story about a lady who might haunt a house in the UK?
Well, in my podcast, I cover green ladies as a sort of spirit of a woman done wrong who's not really just avenging things. She's come back to sort of settle the score. She wants to reveal the real terms of her death. And I start off with a castle in Somerset called Longleat Castle, and it was the ghost of Lady Louisa Carteret. She's the married to the Lord Bath. Gosh, I don't have the dates now, but it was a story. The dates when she lived, I probably could pull it up really quickly, but she was, it's 1712 to 1736, so long ago she existed. And I found the story on an interesting little documentary that was done in the 60s called Ghostly Homes of England.
Okay,
Anyway,
I actually think I've seen it, so I've watched it.
Yeah, it's got, what's her name? She played Miss Marple there. She's in it.
Yeah, that's my wife.
Margaret Rutherford. That's her.
Okay,
She was in it. And they're sort of, it seems more like that they're doing some tourism for Longley, really, but trying to present it in a spooky documentary form. And they go in and they talk to the Lord Bath, and he tells a spooky story about the Green Lady ghost that's in Longley Castle, and he says it's the Lady Louisa Carteret, and that she's often shows up in the hallway as this sort of green haze light that people will get this sense or start, becoming overwhelmed with feelings. Now, whether or not it still happens, I don't know, and whether or not it actually happened and it wasn't promotional, you know, it's who knows. But he actually tells this story about her being, she was married to the current Lord Bath in the 1700s, and that their relationship wasn't successful. And while he was away, she began an affair with some young unnamed man, and
Yeah, that happened a lot, I bet.
yeah, the Lord Bath found out, and there was a big duel. He locked her in the bedroom, and there was a big duel, and he ended up killing her lover, and that she eventually dies of a broken heart. So now she's seen in the hallway as a green light, and they call her the Green Lady of Longley Castle.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't fare out historical when you go look at the records. There's
It sounds like a
no.
TV drama. I mean, it sounds like
Yeah,
something that Miss Marple would investigate. Actually,
exactly.
it's. But interestingly, I know now that Longley on those grounds have a safari park. I don't know if you have those in Canada, but it's basically a place where we can drive our cars, and there are lions roaming around and stuff like that. And
monkeys that pull you
monkeys that pull your
aerials
car to
up.
pieces, yeah. But it's interesting, and I do wonder if around this time, if it was just promotion for trying
Well,
to sell the land, or
well, that's exactly what it was. The Lord Bath at the time in the 60s, he was looking for ways to expand, and the safari park, that's when it was starting to get off the ground. So it was definitely a promotional story, because the fact that he actually tells the story is funny, because when you go look in the history records, there was no man, nobody knows who it is, and Lady Louisa didn't die of a broken heart. She died in childbirth, and her husband was devastated, and he did end up leaving the home and moving to the city, but not because of guilt of killing her lover, because he was devastated because she died in childbirth.
yeah, I mean the fact she died in childbirth tells you that they were clearly in a loving relationship as well, which
Yeah.
kind of puts to bed the story of a lover on the side.
Yes, but I mean, does that mean that there's no green specter ghost? I don't know. When you put it in the terms that there are doing it for promotional, it seems like it could be false, but it could be based on someone's real experience. Like somebody could have had an experience where they've seen some misty, strange lights in the castle. I haven't really found too much online, but that doesn't mean there wasn't accounts or anything written in newspapers or anybody had experiences like that.
So when you've done your research in this case, do you know when the most recent would have been, of the most recent sighting? Because obviously that was in the 60s. Has there been any sightings in the 70s?
I haven't found any recent sightings, and I mean that's in the private part of the household, so it's not open to
Right.
people,
Okay.
like the public. So you're not going to have anybody in the public, at least in that hallway. And I haven't seen anything of the current owners. I know the current Lord of Bath. He's an older fellow and he's pretty eccentric.
Right.
He kind of looks like he could be out of, like, I don't know, Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings. Like he's a pretty eccentric guy. So he might be he might be one to ask. He might
Yeah.
believe in something like that. But his son, who will take over, and his son's wife, they seem pretty modern. So I'd be surprised if they believed in any type of ghost. But you never know.
Okay. It's just kind of thinking about it. We had a program that aired not long ago in England. I think it was just called Ghosts, and it was based around this old stately manor, and it was a comedy, and they had ghosts from all ages. They had a caveman ghost, they had a Victorian ghost, they had a Georgian ghost, and they were all living in this house together, and some new owners brought the house, and it was all about these ghosts trying to prevent these people from buying the house so they could carry on living on their own there. And I do wonder if that's what's going on in these stately homes when they're being renovated, constantly, and that they're being brought up to modern times. I wonder if that can affect the spirits that haunt these houses.
It certainly, and it could also be that, when someone passes away, that you're more likely to see spectral things, and as time passes, that energy just weakens and disperses over time, and it's this, it's a process of death that we don't understand. Like, death might not necessarily be you just die and you're gone. There might be some energy left there, and it's just actually a natural process where the energy just evaporates over time, and there's less and less sightings.
Okay.
And it could also be that only really sensitive people who are in that state of mind pick up on it.
Yeah. I mean, we have in the UK, as I mentioned, we have headless ghost, the headless horseman that quite often haunts these kind of homes. We have the green lady, but the most common is the grey lady. Seen in nearly every historic building in the UK has a grey lady, and I wondered if you'd ever came across that coloured spirit in any of your research.
Well, I've got one right here, actually, interestingly, right in front of my face. There was Ghost Stories of the Trust, so it's the National Trust for
National
Scotland.
Trust,
So these ghosts show up a lot in Scotland. It was the Grey Lady of Falkland Palace.
Okay.
So she has been seen. It's interesting, grey, because I think it could be a visual, like out of the corner, someone misperceives something if it's grey. I don't know.
Yeah.
But apparently it's the same idea. She's waiting the return of her lover who disappeared off to battle and never returned, and she's wandering the castle forever waiting for. So these are these tragic characters, and they are almost like this codependent crazy people who never moved on. Like, they couldn't get over this. They were their whole identity was wrapped up into this lover that they're just doomed to wander the castle. And yeah, it's the exact same themes over and over again.
So with the colours, do you think that the colours particularly relate to anything? So would you see a green lady, and anyone that appears green has a particular backstory, and anyone that appears grey has a different backstory, and therefore that's the reason they're giving off that particular colour?
Well, I actually researched it. We actually talked about this the first time over, and I was like, interesting. So I actually prepared myself and kind of looked up some ideas, because paranormal wise, I never really had an opinion on that. I was looking at it from a folkloric perspective. Now, I mean, green can be highly tied into being earthbound, and like, you've got a lot of pagan sort of Celtic folklore where you have a green man, you've got Lady of the Lake. So green can be tied to a very human energy, a very earthbound energy. And so the color of the ghosts, from what I'm looking up, and could be very woo-woo, it's a place called paranormal.lovetoknow.com, and they're relating exactly.
That sounds like a great website.
Well, I mean, but we're dealing with the paranormal, so people could be calling us woo-woo as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we are talking about ghosts here, so I'm just trying to put it in perspective. But it's about the energy that they give off, and it's associated with where they're vibrating in spirit. So if it's green, they commonly were associating green to an earthbound spirit. They talk about white or silver. I guess you could put gray in that.
Silver could almost be gray.
Really high source, but green is definitely, they're saying it's with the heart and with nature and earthbound human form. Gray and smoky may indicate depression or spiritual lack, an ambivalence and fear. So gray's not a good color. Sorry, ladies. Grays.
Are there any other ladies? Sorry. Any other spirits?
Sorry, can you say that again? You cut out here.
Sorry. Are there any other colour spirits? Because we talk about green and grey ladies, silvery white, but there never seems to be a mention of any other colours.
No, I mean, you never get like a blue lady.
Yeah, or purple or...
Well, like I said, all the other colors that they list here, like, and they're doing it in terms of orbs as well. They don't generally associate with human type spirits. So you're like
Ah,
white and you're silver. You know what? You don't. If you see a black energy, or a black haze, that's not. You don't want to see a black haze because that's
yeah,
associated with something really malignant.
yeah. So that we're
I
moving
don't.
more into to demons, I guess, there, or
Mhm.
shadow men or something.
Yes,
Okay.
it's like, and like red and orange are angry, but the green is very earthbound, and the gray is, maybe they would have been green if they were not as depressed. I don't know.
Well, what's
But
interesting about this is I've obviously appeared on your show as a guest.
hmm
I believe we spoke about the theory that I hold dear, which is that spirits are operating on frequencies that we can't access because it's outside of visible light.
yeah.
Um, and I do wonder, you kind of touched something there where it was that they're vibrating on a particular frequency and therefore they're giving off a particular color.
Yeah.
And that really struck home with me actually, because that makes so much sense. That when they're appearing in our world, into our visible light, um, we're seeing them because they're vibrating on that color, that colored frequency.
Yes, and because some of these figures, like I say, a green lady hasn't moved on and they're still earthbound, they're going to appear green. They are not. It's that if someone's transitioned, and this is, again, I'm going a little bit woo woo here, sorry guys, but if someone's transitioned and they come back, they might appear white and glowy and blue. Like, I've heard of people who've had visitations right after somebody has died, and they've come at their bedside and they're glowing blue or they're glowing white and really bright, and but they don't seem to be stuck in that place. They seem to have moved on and are coming back to relay a message, and then they're gone. They don't seem to be statically stuck there.
Okay, it almost reminds me of a spirit aura. So as we know, being in the paranormal world, there's this thing called auras that mediums claim to be able to see that surround us, and someone will say, "Oh, your aura is blue," or "You have a yellow aura," and I wonder if that's the case. I wonder if they've just taken their aura with them into spirit, and that's what we're seeing.
Perhaps, but I mean, I would think if you're a living human, that those colors are also going to tie into emotion. So I would think that
Yeah, yeah,
it wouldn't be one constant color. Like, I could be gray today and then be in a better mood tomorrow, and that might affect it. I always felt of the aura was tied to be a living, and that it was not some static thing. It sort of changed with how you felt.
Well, I
But
guess off the back of that,
yeah,
is it possible that the spirits can change their colours?
yeah,
There are many
sure.
places where they have a green, a grey lady, and other different spirits. Is it possible that it's the same spirit? We're just seeing them in different moods, or
Possibly. I guess it depends. Like, well, you get this idea that there's a ghost that is just it's not actually a spirit functioning there that's conscious. It's just an impression. So I would suppose, I would think that the green lady was probably an impression, if she existed, that it was that at that time what they felt and what they were doing was stamped into the environment, and it was replaying itself. So that, it's not going to change. It might fade, but if it was some sort of living conscious energy that was there, I wouldn't see why it couldn't change.
okay, okay,
Yeah.
So if you were to say, for example, to die in a specific mood, if you were angry, then your aura would possibly follow you into your spirit form.
Say that again, sorry.
If you were to die in a specific mood, say you were
Mhm.
angry,
yeah.
then
So you could die sad, or you could
yeah,
die, yeah.
and
Mhm.
your aura would follow you into your spirit form. So hence why you get.
Well, it's not. So what it is when you give off emotion, you can actually project it, and it's actually not you. It's the energy that you give off. It's almost like you're projecting a mental thought form and emotion, and it actually exists on its own, and it's separate from who you are. There's
Okay,
that there's like if I put out energy out into my field and I'm thinking thoughts, it can actually have its own form separate from me. and weird things can start happening in my environment, and it's like an unconscious projection of what I'm doing. Like it's and if you're going through some traumatic thing, like I had a guest on my show, and she was talking about some ghosts from an Asian country, and there were these monks, and they were, before they were executed, they were made to march around and around and around, and then they were executed while they were marching, and it was like during war, and this was an actual thing. And so
Wow.
what got left behind was that horrible, terrible feeling that who they really are on and moves on, but that it's that feeling and that emotion that they're doing, and that gets stamped in there and left behind. It's not them, they're gone. It's that activity and the emotion that it's literally, it's like you write a book and you take your pen and you write a bunch of thoughts and feelings, and that book's left behind and it deteriorates for a while, and whatever, but that's not you move on with your day. But there's your emotions there in that book. It's a recording.
The residual energy sort
Yeah,
of.
yeah, residual, exactly.
That,
That's the good word for it. So that doesn't. So like I said, it's context. Is it somebody who's coming back that's a conscious entity, or something that is alive and flexible, or is it residual? Is it something that's just a recording? And it's going to stay the same color. It might fade and then dissipate over time because it weakens, and that it just starts deteriorating because it's in the physical field, the physical world. Things deteriorate. They're only temporary here. Everything is always, degrading and deteriorating.
Yeah, yeah. I think you've kind of just blown my mind a little bit there. I mean, there's a theory that I've been kind of playing with lately, and it was, is it possible that we can manifest our own hauntings? So we manifest the ghosts that we actually see, and the paranormal activity that we see. And so I've been toying with the idea that maybe UFOs and Bigfoot and ghosts, they're all the same paranormal entity if you stripped away the world and you got right down to the coding. So is it possible that when we see a ghost or a Bigfoot, what we're doing is just manifesting our own beliefs onto that point of attention, that frequency, and therefore we're seeing it how we want to see it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think most of our experiences, I wouldn't say it's all a projection. I do think that there's like a solid reality, but we are definitely projecting stuff, thoughts and experiences and subconscious elements onto events that happen in front of us. That's why we have opinions and points of view. But I mean, there's the idea of a tulpa. I'm sure you're familiar with that, where you can actually take your thought forms, and if you focus really hard, and they've done experiments on this. My former podcast, we actually did a little experiment on this, and you can create from your thought forms and emotions. If you're describing something enough, you can actually create a tulpa, which is like a thought form spirit, and it actually, given enough emotional energy, it can actually become its own separate being or energy and take on. And at first it will start when you early stages, when you're creating it, it will start mimicking you. It'll be like you and your thought forms and exactly how you're thinking it is. And then once it gets so much power, it can actually almost start taking on its own personality and acting separate and independent of the people who created it with their thoughts.
So is this
So it's a theory. It's Tulpa is like, I think it's Buddhist. It's a Buddhist concept, if I'm not mistaken.
So would that be similar to if you, let's say you're dreading something that's going to happen, and you kind of you think you failed a test or you failed an exam, and you keep thinking to, I know I failed, I know I failed, I know I failed, and then you do fail. Is that are we talking about the same thing there, or?
I don't know if they're exactly. I think it's a similar concept, but like with a tulpa, you're actually focusing on creating a being. With the test, I think, I mean, you're focusing so much on failing. It's kind of like law of attraction that you're actually getting yourself worked up, and so I think they're very similar because they all come from thoughts and emotion, but there's some nuance there.
So this tulpa, I don't know how much you know about this, but it's very interesting. Is does it then exist within this world? And does it look
Yeah.
like you? Are you basically creating a doppelganger? I don't know if you've ever watched Twin Peaks,
No,
but I'm thinking of.
I. It's
I'm thinking.
not. It's the Talpa will be created and it will look like however you're envisioning it and describing it. Like we did someone, the famous one, and I don't have the story up here in front of me, is that they recreated this character of a monk and it actually started to show up shadowy. So if you keep, there has been, what was it? The Philip experiment. They did, this was a Canadian thing. They created this ghostly figure called Philip where they described things and they were saying that it was actually starting to appear. It was a group effort where they were trying to be scientific. I'm sure there's lots of holes in their experiments. I don't know how scientific you can be about this, but they were creating this character called Philip that lived hundreds of years ago, and people started to experience different things. Now, I would say if the group is experiencing it, it's sort of got holes, but I would say the key to it is like if you're creating this figure and other people who don't know about it start seeing it. Like I knew somebody who talked about creating a spider tulpa just as experiment, and then he moved out of that apartment, and people started to complain about seeing spider things that disappeared. So like if somebody who had no idea that you did it started to describe, hey, I'm experiencing this, or I seen this thing and it disappeared, and it was kind of like what you were trying to create, then I would say you have some indication that there's something to it. I think that would be the important part. But the tulpa is you're specifically creating. It could look like you if you imagined it, absolutely, but it could look like something totally different.
I think that what's interesting is that I like how you separated there the group and somebody that's not involved experiencing it, because the thing I was thinking then while you were describing that was, well, if they've put so much thought and energy into it, when they're, and inverted commas, when they're seeing it, are they just seeing it in their mind? Have they thought about it so much that it's not physically there, there's no physical shadow, they're just seeing it in their mind because they want to that badly?
Yeah, and that's where I would say that's the whole that would be the fair criticism of that. You would want to have, like, for instance, when people experience sleep paralysis, you can say, well, they're hallucinating, and there is all this evidence that they can't transition from a REM state to a waking state, and that's why they're having this old hag on them. But what has made me fascinated about it is when people who had no sleep paralysis or visiting them or sleeping over, and they start seeing this hag and they start seeing things and experiencing paranormal stuff when they're around them. I would say, does it mean there's a hag? No, but it certainly means that something's going on, or the mind's manifesting something and it's actually taking up space and affecting other people in reality.
Yeah, I mean, sleep paralysis, again, is that anything you've ever experienced? I've personally never experienced. Oh, you have, right?
Once. Yeah, once I did. I mean, I used to have night terrors when everything was not good in home life. Like when I was married, I used to have like bad nightmares, but I actually did have a sleep paralysis where I felt someone was walking in. I thought I was wide awake, and someone came in down the hallway in the room and crawled up on top of me and started trying to strangle me. And once it happened, and it never happened again. So I did experience it, and it's very real. You think you're awake and you think it's really happening, and so I can see why people are so like terrified by having that.
But you accredit it to sleep paralysis, nothing paranormal, nothing.
Well, I thought, because we were actually doing a Tulpa experiment at the time, I thought it could be equated to that, or I didn't want to draw an absolute conclusion. It could have been equated to that, or it could have been about just something was bothering me that I was unaware of. It was unconscious.
Okay.
Or a bad dream, and could have been a bad dream, and I just wasn't able to wake up from it. It's not something that's happened again. There's a lot of people who have that. They keep having sleep paralysis. Like they'll have it reoccurring, and it gets worse and worse. So it was a one-time thing, and it never happened again. Thankfully.
Okay. So that was a huge, massive diversion away from from
green ladies.
But
I know.
It was good. So just kind of bringing it back on track a little bit. a lot of people often claim that they see shadowy people. I know you've got there's the famous shadow man or the hat man that people always claim to see, and it's always a black shadow. Do you think it is a shadow, or do you think it's just like the green lady or the grey lady, but this is the black lady or the black man, for example?
Well, I think this is okay. This is gonna get a little weird. Why not? Let's go for it. So shadowy figures. The interesting thing about shadowy figures is that, let's see if I can phrase this the best way. Is that I think they could be. I don't think they're green like the green lady from the earthbound spirit. I think they're from somewhere else.
Okay.
Because like when you're talking about two-dimensional, three-dimensional, four-dimensional, if we're in the three dimension, we can't operate in the fourth because space and time, we have that concept, but we're in the three dimension. And if there were beings that existed in a two dimension, they wouldn't be able to perceive us in the third dimension. So when we would put our finger down, they wouldn't see it as our finger come towards them because they can only go back, back and forth. They can't move in three-dimensional space. They would see it as a shadow. So I think if something is visiting us and we're seeing it as a shadow figure, it's coming from somewhere else and we can't see its form. We can only see it as a shadow. Does that make sense?
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I've never ever
That's
thought
what I think.
that's fantastic. Just a few seconds of silence there while I'm trying to process that. So would you say that they're coming from? So if we were to look at if someone from a lower dimension, so this second dimension, they would only see us as a shadow. So
Yeah.
if we're only seeing a shadow, does that mean it's coming from a higher dimension?
I don't know. Well, it would have to be higher dimension because we're
Yeah,
in the third
but
floor,
yeah,
so it would have to
yeah.
be. I don't. Because we can actually see two dimension as it is. I don't think. I mean, I have no concept of fifth, sixth. Like I have, like we will never. I will never know because I don't have any concept. But if, in my opinion, there's something to if we're seeing shadowy figures, they're coming from somewhere else where we can't perceive them as they are. I don't know, maybe that's the best. But the other notion is if they're feeding, they usually tend to frighten people and feed on fear. And so what you have to know is they are in our realm. We are operating here. This is our domain. So we're calling the shots. So you need to take charge when you see that, not to be afraid of it.
But it's not necessarily saying that they're malicious or evil just because we can't code what they are.
Well, from the color, I would say that color is generally associated with something negative because they certainly have a negative effect on people when people see them. I don't think it's totally in people's heads. Like, yes, people might be afraid because they don't know, but I don't know what a green haze is either. I don't know what a lot of different things are, but they don't inspire the same feeling. The actual color of it, whatever it is, wherever it's coming from, I think it's literally having a physiological effect on people that makes them afraid because it's actually having, like, when a lot of people physically are actually physically responding to it. It's not just all in their mind or their emotional. You can be like one time I was doing an interview and it's the first time it ever happened. I was talking to somebody who had poltergeist experience here on the Pacific West Coast of Canada. Actually, he's in the US. But while I was interviewing, about 3/4 of the way into the interview, I suddenly felt like something was right behind me. And I've never had this before. And all the hairs on the back of my neck stood up and it didn't feel very good. And he was talking about negative stuff and it could have been me. But I'm not, like, I don't go into flights of fancies while I'm interviewing people. I'm pretty, like, question answer. And it felt like someone for about 2 or 3 minutes was standing there and it didn't feel very good. And it was actually having a physiological effect on me. Like, the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up and I started to feel very strange. And I was like, okay, whatever you are, go away. And I could feel it leave. And then the hair, everything went back to normal. So I do think that, yes, we can have mind problems, like we can manifest stuff and get emotional for things that are not there, but I think that things can also really be happening that has a physiological effect on people. And these black things or shadow people, if they're showing up when you're not sleeping, if you're having sleep paralysis, that's different. But if you're like waking life and you see some black shadowy thing and you're not feeling very good, there's something physically happening in your environment that's affecting you.
Yeah, I mean, we've done investigations and we've seen these shadow beings, shadow creatures, spirits, whatever you want to call them. It's the exact same effects on us. We feel uneasy. You do feel that negativity and all these sort of feelings and emotions. So yeah, I'd agree with you on that.
I think what's interesting is that
but
you can see, for anyone that's investigated this, you can see these shadows even in pitch black.
Yeah, and it's quite strange to put into context how a room can be dark,
but you can still see
but
shadows.
You can see a dark object in a dark room, and that object then moves out the room and the room becomes light. But even you could say it's always adapting, but then the object will come back into the room and the room's dark, but you haven't moved rooms. It's very
probably if you guys have ever gone caving, you when you're doing your investigation, you probably perceive your room as absolutely dark, but it's probably not pitch black. If you go caving down and all the lamps are turned out, that's pitch black, and and your mind can start filling things into. So you have to be really careful, because I've done caving before, and when they turn the lights out, it was literally pitch black. You couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. So I think when you're in a room and it's dark, it's dark. You can't see anything, but it's not pitch. So you would still, if there was something darker, you would be able to see it.
I think we've done a location called Drakelow Tunnels, which isn't that far from where we are, and it was like a nuclear bunker, and you're about 400 feet underground at the deepest point, and there's about 5 miles worth of tunnels, and the tunnels are huge. You can get like 2 Arctic lorries side by side down some of these tunnels. Just to go down there for the architectural side of things is fascinating, but it's exactly the same there. When the lights go off, you cannot see the hand in front of your face. It is so creepy down there, and we've experienced it down there. You know, we've seen like a darker mass, and you think, how is that possible? You know, there's no light anywhere, there's no electricity in most of this place. How can we see a darker mass on what we would perceive as the darkest shade of color?
Yeah, that's okay, so if you are seeing something, I know when we went caving, they said, well, then it's your mind filling stuff in and hallucinating. But I didn't have a sense of dread when I was caving. So if I'm somewhere and all of a sudden I start having the sense of dread and it's pitch dark, you know, that's not a good. I mean, you do have to say, like, it could be electromagnetic frequency. There could be stuff there is stuff in our environment that can cause people to act strange, and how that's true. You have to be honest about that. But generally speaking, if I'm sitting in my house and I feel fine, and something is all of a sudden behind me and I don't feel good, and it feels like someone's standing right there almost touching me, like, I don't think I'm having EMF changes like that would cause that, like, because then I would be having those EMF changes all the time, not just one time for one interview and then never happens again.
Well, what's interesting is, just talking about Drakelow Tunnels, is down there we've quite often seen they look like sparks of light that are just appearing out of nowhere, but they're always white or green. And I wonder if that again goes back to these coloured ladies that we speak about. So we never see another colour really; it's always white or green. And I wonder if what we're seeing there is the same energy that is appearing as a lady.
It could be. Yeah, I mean, that's possible.
Because we've had mediums that said that it's positive energy. It means that there's love, or there's you know, things like that around. So
yeah, like this research that I did on the lights talked about green being associated with the heart, which is interesting, because you think it'd be red, but red is actually more associated with anger, something more aggressive.
Well, interestingly, I think I can never remember which one it is. It's the longest or the shortest, but it's the red is the longest or shortest frequency in terms of colours, and that's why it catches our attention so much. So that's why they use it as stop signs or warning signs and things like. Or in the Matrix, it was the lady in the red dress.
They use it a lot in horror. Set your heart racing. Like that.
Yeah.
So red is the longest. I'm actually looking this up. So
red is the longest.
But red is longer than all the other one. That's right. You
Yeah.
are correct. So
And I wonder
the
if that's why
frequency,
we never see a red
the
light.
wavelength. Yeah, the wavelength is longer. The frequency is shorter.
Yeah, that's
I
it.
don't know what
And
that means.
and I wonder if that means why we never see a red lady. Maybe it's something to do with how we're decoding the frequency or something. I don't know. Maybe.
Could, yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Because yeah, no, go ahead. I'm just looking at this little thing about ultraviolet visible light, and I'm like, okay, I'm not even gonna try to unpack that.
I bet I can send you the exact that. I bet that's the image that I use in my presentation. So that's basically what I talk about with my theory and how we can only see 0.05% of
Yeah.
the light spectrum, and then so you think, well, what's happening in the 99.95% that we can't perceive? So that's like the ultraviolet and the infrared. And interestingly, people have done studies and found that ultraviolet always seems to harbour positive energy, whereas infrared seems to harbour a more negative energy. And you have animals such as dogs, cats, reptiles who can see into the infrared, and that's for hunting purposes. And how often do you have an animal sitting in your house staring at something that you can't see, or reacting to something in the corner of your room that you
So
can't see?
so that's so funny because you have infrared saunas being promoted as health, and people are sitting in infrared heat. And they're
That's
just like,
very
it's so
true, yeah.
healthy, but you're saying no, it's more negative. I'm like, oh, that's the last time I go in an infrared sauna.
Yeah, I mean that's just some of the research that's been done. I mean, when people have had negative energies contacting them on spirit boards, they will shine a UV torch onto it, and very quickly the negativity seems to stop. So they've associated that the infrared is negative and the ultraviolet is positive. So it's very interesting. Again, it plays into the this color scheme and the color of ladies. I wonder if there are any colored ladies haunting places that we can't see because it's outside of the visible light.
Oh, I would bet that there would be, where maybe you're going to have more of a sense of a feelings, or rather than seeing a light, it's going to be more that you get perceptions or images in your head, or you actually just start reacting. Excuse me, my throat. I
Okay,
just need to clear my throat. Sorry, guys.
that's okay.
You might just start reacting to something emotionally or start feeling certain ways, but you can't see it. And it could be because that wavelength is affecting you and you can't perceive it.
Wow. Okay. I guess we'll start wrapping up now because I know that have you got work today or
No, day off. I just,
nice easy Sunday.
for some strange reason, my throat is getting, I don't know, hopefully I'm not getting a sore throat and sick, but
Oh, everyone.
my voice is a little more raspy today. So I'm
Um,
selling, yeah.
Okay, so obviously you've already mentioned you're the host of the Secret Door podcast, which I am a huge fan of. I subscribe to YouTube. I listen to every single one of your shows. I'm loving the new format with your co-host. I think it's taken it in a great direction. But would you like to let our listeners know where they can
Sorry.
find you or contact you?
You'll probably have to edit this part out because my throat is getting. Whoa. Okay,
That's
so
okay, we'll leave
yeah.
it in. It's
No,
great.
clear it out. I'm like, you can edit that part out. I'm good. Yeah, so I started the Secret Door podcast, and I have a new co-host. She's someone I've known for decades. She's sort of psychic, exorcist, paranormal, intuitive, and I do a lot of the same things in research. So my co-host is Linnea Pearson, and you can find everything at secretdoorpodcast.com. We do an hour show every week, and I'm going to be doing little mini sort of in the news paranormal shows that I'm just putting on YouTube, little short 10-15 minute videos during the week. Hopefully I can keep that up. So that's what we're doing. So an hour discussion with either us or a guest on Fridays, Saturdays, and then little mini video clips on YouTube just talking about what's in the news for paranormal or alternative spirituality and maybe even cryptozoology. It's all tied in.
Okay. Can you give us the latest headline from the paranormal news world?
Oh, I'm having a video coming out on Monday, a little mini clip, and it is about an article I was actually posted on our Facebook group, and it's about a psychic who has been arrested because she frauded a woman out of over $70,000
Wow.
because her claim, the psychic's claim, was that this woman's daughter had a demon, and they had to exorcise the demon and put the evil spirit, take it out of the daughter and put it into a Barbie doll. So I sort of discussed why that is not good, and why, I mean, my friend operates as an exorcist and an intuitive, and we're like, wow, that's pretty crazy. So that's my little news clip. So I make it a little more, it's not the long format, it's short, and I make it a little more entertaining. So I'm talking about, Barbie as a demonic vessel.
It's like Chucky or
Annabelle.
Yeah.
Annabelle.
I'm not even going to, I totally do that. I totally make that connection.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Action Man's in for a good day.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Brilliant. Well, thank you for coming back on again. Hopefully this works, and hopefully this goes out coughing and all.
Sorry guys. I think I'm coming down with something, so then the voice is just getting a little raspy. I normally have a little bit higher pitch voice, actually.
An angelic voice, shall we say?
Yeah. Maybe not.
So yeah, thank you very much for coming on. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll definitely catch up soon again. Maybe have another crossover on each other's show again in the future.
Sounds like a plan. Sounds great. Thank you guys for having me on. It was great.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. See ya.
Okay, so that was our interview there with Melissa Martell. Hopefully she's not too ill. Hopefully she gets a bit better after this interview. I know she was coughing a bit towards the end there. I know there's a lot of it going around here.
Oh, maybe not in Canada.
No, yeah, I don't think it'd go that far, but yeah, I know around our parts, everybody seems to be ill with something or another. So yeah, it was an interesting topic. Went completely off.
Yeah, completely off tangent.
Yeah, went on a huge diversion there. But still interesting. I mean, God, what did we cover? Shadowy people, sleep paralysis, how dark it can be in caves.
Caves.
Yeah, I mean,
it's caves.
we'll I don't know how we got onto caves, but we'll definitely get Melissa back on. She's a great girl. We'll get her back on and we'll talk about. We'll probably just go off on another tangent, to be honest.
Start off with the subject.
Start off on the subject and then completely move on. But yeah, please, guys, do check out her podcast. Subscribe to her on YouTube. It's the Secret Door Podcast. She's just taken it in a new direction, as we mentioned, with a new co-host, and it's really working for her. And she's just an all-round great lady. So yeah, our next episode, I'm not sure what that's going to be. It might be the part 2 of last episode, the video that we did where we were talking about investigation techniques and tools that we use, and we'll have our guest on that should have been on, but unfortunately he had to cancel. That's Les. So Les is a fellow investigator, part of our group. He's been doing it for years and years, probably, I'm sure he won't mind me saying, before I was born.
Before I was born.
Yeah, before we were born. He was knocking around with a K2 meter or
They even invented
spirit
that
board.
then.
I don't know. But yeah, so
Sorry, Les.
he's a veteran of the field, shall we say, is Les, and he'll certainly bring on some great insight into the subject of paranormal investigating. Also, on a personal note, I've got a few dates coming up, a few lectures around the UK. I'm not sure when this will go out, so you may have missed it, but if it comes out before, on the 23rd of January, I'm talking at BUFOG, Birmingham UFO Group. So look that up. I think I've shared the invitation onto the Paranormal Paradigm Facebook page. In March, I am at East Anglia UFO, which I think is over in Cheltenham Way, or Cambridge, Newmarket, yeah.
Newmarket.
And I think May, I'm back up in Newcastle for Truth Seekers Northeast, which is I think it's just outside the city centre in Newcastle. So if any of you are in these areas, let me know if you want to come along, and I'll make sure I come and talk to you. So as always, thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Ryan, for joining me on such short notice.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully you guys enjoyed Ryan's input. I know Melissa struggled to understand his black country accent a bit there, but if ever he takes this up permanently, I'm sure he can work on his linguistic.
I've always been told I have a face for radio, so
Yeah. And then if any of our listeners come from our area, maybe you can understand him a little bit better. Who knows? I might put It's unfortunately this isn't a video, so we can't put subtitles, which probably would have suited. But yeah, Happy New Year to you guys again. I know it's kind of when do we stop saying this? And thank you for listening as always. Feel free to share the podcast. Feel free to comment, and we'll speak to you very soon. Thank you very much.